for some folks to join us. Thank you for your patience. We're excited to be with you this evening. We are joined by Anila. Oh, I got some feedback on another call. We have a couple of us behind the scenes working the technology. We're going to give it just a couple more minutes. I can see the participant number going up and up and up as everyone connects in. So we're really excited to be with you all. Okay, it looks like we've stabilized a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I want to welcome everyone this evening. Also let you know that we are recording and this will be available at a later time on our YouTube channel. So definitely check that out. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Kim Kuda-Drang and I am the Director of Learning Engagement at the Cummer Museum of Art and Gardens. We are very thrilled to host this exciting lecture with you, and hopefully you've all had a chance to see the exhibition in person, because the photos, while they're awesome, they're not going to do it justice. So I want to take a minute just to thank some of our sponsors before we get going. We have some exhibition sponsors that we're really excited about. They help us bring dynamic exhibitions such as Flight Patterns from Anila Quayyum Agha. So our celebrated sponsor is the Van Vleck family. We also have seasoned presenters, the City of Jacksonville, Cultural Council of Greater Jacksonville, Lori Doolittle, and Ronald and Karen Retner. Our season lead sponsors, the Robert D. Davis Family Endowment, the Schultz Family Endowment, and the State of Florida. Our season sponsors, the Director's Circle at the Cummer Museum, the Winston Family Foundation, and then for programmatic sponsors, we have some endowment support from the J. Wayne and Dolores Barr Weaver Endowment, as well as the Ida Broward Boyd and Crowther Mann Boyd Endowment. So thank you very much for sharing the love and support with those folks. A little virtual housekeeping. I mentioned that a recording will be available later on. Also, toward the end, we should have about 15 minutes or so for question and answer. So use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Drop your questions in there, and we, along with Anila, will answer as many as we can. If we don't have time this evening, we'll certainly get back to you all. All righty. Thanks so much. So I'm delighted to introduce Anila. She's a world-renowned Pakistani American artist and uses art to explore her dual experiences living in her native country and as an immigrant in the United States. So tonight, Anila will share stories behind the latest exhibition called Anila Quayyum Agha, Flight Patterns. This was organized by the Cummer Museum of Art and Gardens and curated by Holly Karras, who is our J. Wayne and Dolores Barr Weaver Chief Curator. And with that, I'm very honored and pleased to introduce you to Anila Quayyum Agha. Take it away, Anila.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate the welcome. Okay. Okay, presenter's view. Can we make sure that everybody's getting to see the one slide rather than my notes as well?
I'm going to investigate that right now.
Okay. All good? So I'm going to start, Kim, if that's okay.
That sounds great. I'm just logging in from my phone just so I could check out your view.
Okay. I wanted to say thank you for coming in and joining me today. I returned to the States this past Monday, and I'm a little under the weather. I opened 2 exhibits in Europe, and if I cough a little, I apologize. Please bear with me. This year is my 23rd year in the United States. Almost half of my life has been spent here. I started my journey from Virginia to Texas to Indiana, and now based part-time in Georgia. This is my partner and husband, Steve Prachel, who also fabricates all the large sculptures. And this is a tiny window into one of our vacations this past year. We found a little bit of time to actually do some zip lining, which was really awesome, much fun. So to start with, I was born and raised in Pakistan during pretty turbulent political and economic times. The country was newly formed. Its roots were really ancient, yet the geographical borders were really newly drawn. For those who may not know, Pakistan was part of a larger country, India, and colonized by Britain for centuries. Colonization comes with myriad problems that may never dissipate. And after independence from the British, the subcontinent was divided into multiple countries. Pakistan, because it was forming a new country, developed amnesia over its past history, which often happens when new regimes are born. And Pakistan wanted a new identity that negated its Hindu roots and made alliances with Arab nations to show solidarity without much in common other than religion between the Arabs or the Pakistanis. So thus started a new era of looking away from the subcontinent's ancient history to form a new culture. Pakistani people are gregarious, funny, smart, and loving with a great sense of humor and enjoy a great time, usually around food, song, and dance. But the false morality of the new country denied both song and dance, and especially integration of the sexes. Despite cultural disapproval due to the dominant religious practices and historical amnesia, I decided to attend a co-ed art school, and oh, the horror. Oh, art college were wonderful. I had amazing feminist professors who encouraged us to go on marches with them to protest multiple laws. One of them was titled the Hudud Ordinance, a set of laws that criminalized non-marital sex, including rape, and have led to thousands of women being imprisoned for so-called honor crimes in Pakistan. Some of you may know what's happening recently in Afghanistan. It has similarities to what was happening in the at that time in Pakistan as well. In my late 20s, I moved to the US. As an immigrant, I started over. Dallas, Texas was home, and I went to the University of North Texas to do my MFA. I was often encouraged to conform and make work in a more Euro-Western style. After graduation, I moved to Houston for an artist residency at the Houston Center for Art, Contemporary Craft, freed me up and allowed me to make work without judgment. In the US, I faced discrimination as an immigrant and found much in common with discrimination I had faced in Pakistan as a woman. Having moved around so much, I feel a deep connection to displaced people anywhere in the world, and this piece reflects much of my oeuvre. Commerce and trade have opened up cultures via both assimilation and appropriation through the ages. Recently, a journalist in London asked me a question. She said, "Isn't appropriation akin to admiration?" My response was, admired appropriation is based on equal footing, but when it's done through colonization, it's considered stealing. Capitalism and colonization brought many problems in its aftermath. Currently, the biggest one that we are facing is climate change. It seems much of the previously colonized regions of the world that were eroded with loss of resources and people through slavery and indentured labor still continue to pay the price in this current global scenario. I, of course, am responsible as well. I just flew thousands of miles. But this piece reflects the world back upon ourselves as nature and humans are inextricably linked. According to scientists, the planet's warming through climate change will continue its destruction, affecting the global south and its populations with rising waters causing people to become displaced in the low-lying areas such as Bangladesh, Japan, Taiwan, Vietnam, the Bahamas, New Orleans, the west coast of the Americas, forest fires, drinking water problems, I think no one will be safe. And the global north will have to contend with refugees showing up on its doorstep. I suppose we could all let them drown in the oceans or die on the borders, but conversely, we could let them into our borders and start managing our contributions to the heating of the planet. I hope that maybe humans will choose humanity over their own comfort and economics. This piece and the two previous pieces reflects the present and future migrations of people and animals, appropriation, colonization, commerce, and the breakneck speed of the use of the world's resources and the underserved communities of the world. Some lucky few may find open borders and acceptance, thus becoming naturalized, while the majority will be returned to disappear or become extinct, which is really sad.
Mm-hmm.
I like this passage of the book, The Invisible Dragon, Essays on Beauty by Dave Hickey. He writes, beauty is not a thing, the beautiful is a thing. In images, beauty is the agency that causes visual pleasure in the beholder, and since pleasure is the true occasion for looking at anything, any theory of images that is not grounded in the pleasure of the beholder begs the question of art's efficacy and dooms itself to inconsequence. This paragraph gave me the desire to create beautiful art. It may also have been due to the brutal critiques I received in graduate school regarding my well-crafted artwork. Often the comments circled around the inconsequential and banal nature of beauty. Around then, I realized the importance of investing my work with meaning. Over the past 2 decades, during my travels both to Pakistan and elsewhere, I have explored historical buildings. My process of self-discovery has led me to the conclusion that I'm deeply interested in metaphorical architectural spaces, interiors and exteriors suggestive of the private, social, and political domains. I'm further fascinated by the combination of the old and new architecture patched together to preserve both ancient and new, similar to human lives and relationships. I love experiencing the imaginary vibrations through the ground of centuries of people having lived in these old spaces, renewing them time and again, hopefully with improvements. I want my art to shift between ideas of displaced and reconstructed identity, reflecting my own experiences. I wanted to touch upon literacy that allowed me to soar while using gender and its resultant issues as a point of discussion. And to make my art excruciatingly beautiful, creating a cliffhanger where opposites collide or meet, creating a combustible moment. I want the viewer to confront the contradictory nature of all intersections while simultaneously exploring boundaries. Noticeably, my work has grown more abstract with a narrative element dependent on both the invisible and the actual presence of displaced and gendered identities. A Beautiful Despair was conceived and completed during the pandemic, thus reflective of the huge losses we have all faced, yet there's hope for renewal. This is the same piece that is being shown at Cummer right now. I start with familiar Islamic motifs I have seen or photographed that in due course become reinterpretations of the original designs and allow me to infuse a contemplative focus suggestive of the underlying order of both the cosmos and the natural world through symmetries found in nature. Excuse me one sec. I'm interested in projects that explore contradictions such as the gaze and who is viewing whom, contradictory perspectives, desire for recognition, the hidden and the revealed. Often my goal is to explore the binaries of the public and private, light and shadow, and static and dynamic, by relying on the purity and inner symmetry of geometric design and the interpretations of the cast shadows in the sculptural installations. I enjoy the contradictions of chaos enclosed within regimented geometries and the more intimate flat works, or the chaotic immersive shadows that result from rigid geometric objects like the cubes. My artwork stems from a desire to research, review, highlight, or correct in some small measure the gender and the racial imbalances that exist in the world due to race, color, creed, class, or gender. The familiar Islamic motifs, due to their reproductions in public environments, allow me to excavate and reinterpret these motifs from the everyday and elevate them to the extraordinary to reveal the complexities of symbiosis between genders, cultures, and civilizations, and the amorphous borders between them all. While living in Pakistan, I found the gender intolerance perpetuated by illiteracy and, in my opinion, incorrect interpretations of religious dogma, and perpetuated by state-sanctioned laws such as the Hudud Ordinance. However, it is not a problem based only in the poor localities of the world. It is a global problem perpetuated by illiteracy, lack of opportunities, and economic conditions directly resulting in ill treatment of gendered people. As a young woman in Pakistan, I became interested in the gender complexities in our societies. Over time here in the US, through research and the art-making process, I continue to try to understand gender politics, patriarchal domination, intersectionality, identity, race, colonization, and its aftermath. These last few years during the pandemic, I have read many books that blew my mind. Some maybe the audience may not welcome, but I wanted to mention some of the titles. Ain't I a Woman? White Fragility and Against White Feminism. All are critical and many may not appreciate them, but much became apparent to me for the defensiveness we encounter when dominant cultures create policy that affects all of us, that is white, brown, black, male, female, LGBTQR, or in between. I think the defensiveness and intolerance harms all of us physically and mentally. Currently, I'm reading the book titled Strong Men by Ruth Ben-Ghiat to understand the authoritarian tendencies we're witnessing in global politics now. I may have become cynical as I see hypocrisy in world politics that elevate certain regions over others. During my research, I explored American artists such as Eva Hess and Cy Twombly and was drawn to their alternative style of drawing. Back then, I considered myself an artist who only makes drawings. I felt drawing had to be personal, and for me, it became a way of expression, and I decided to stretch it to encompass mark making through multiple mediums. Drawing in itself also helped me open up to new worlds. In my drawings and flat work, embroidery takes the feminine into the masculine arena, subverting the known balance of power and ensuring conversations about the definitions of low craft versus high art and assigning feminine or masculine roles to objects, processes, and situations. I often think of the numerous invisible women who hold families together, create communities, build homes, and in spite of the issues besetting them, manage strengths in the face of adversity. I have been drawn to collecting surface patterned and textured textiles all my life, but initially shied away from exploring it in my own work, although it showed up regardless. I think it was due to the condescending debate on pattern and decoration being too feminine and thus crafty and carrying little to no meaning while at graduate school. I'm glad now that that is a thing of the past, and artists who me included, are using pattern, textile processes, and craft to tell stories like Bisa Butler, Ann Wilson, etc. Recently, I listened to an amazing Smithsonian lecture by Julia Bryan Wilson discussing her book, Embellished Legacies. She discussed 3 currently rediscovered female artists that use textiles, embroideries, and patterning in their work. And I'm eager to read the book soon. I conceive the flat works often as a series of collage drawings, thinking of them like pages from a book to provide a continuous narrative. My drawings are concerned with similar objectives as the installations, but on a more intimate level. Over the years, I have also noticed that I jump back and forth in time and make new work to connect with an earlier work that I might have done several years before. Usually the impetus is to explore how social and gender-based issues result from concepts constructed by our past and recent histories and traditions that continue to shadow us into contemporary times. Through the use of a mixed media approach, I explore the deeply entwined political relationships between gender, culture, religion, labor, and social codes. In my drawings, I have used combinations of textile processes such as embroidery, wax, dyes, silk-screen printing, both traditional drawing process and materials, as well as sculptural methodologies to reveal and question the gendering of textiles or craft work as inherently domesticated and excluded from being considered an art form. I enjoy adding translucent effects through the use of wax surfaces and mylar to obscure or reveal layers similar to the concept of the jali or the mashrabia. My experiences in both my native country and as an immigrant here in the States inform and are woven into my work of redefining and rewriting women's handiwork as a poignant form of creative expression. I use embroidery as a drawing medium to reveal the multiple levels resulting from the interaction of concept and process, and to bridge the gap between modern materials and historical patterns of traditional oppression and domestic servitude. Much of my work is labor-intensive, creating a narrative of revealing and concealing through process, materials, and concept. Shadows add another layered dimension to the drawings, and the piece becomes a 3-dimensional object. I believe in building community in the place I live, creating dialogue, tolerance, acceptance, and understanding within people of various economic and cultural descents. This desire to build bridges is generated by earlier memories from Pakistan. In the fall every year, my mother would invite women of the neighborhood to help make quilts. The women didn't belong to any one particular social group. They would come with the needles and threads and make the quilts by hand while talking about families, the neighborhood, and our communities. The quilts were the result of a social endeavor organized by my mother. Within my work, embroidery embodies an essential femaleness because the push of the needle and the pull of the thread together represent the domestic identity of women and their ambivalent relationship to that identity. Furthermore, the embroidery is a drawing line and beckons people in to look deeper, irrespective of gender, sexual preference, or cultural background. I hope it makes them rethink about their own histories and the prejudices we all carry. During the embroidery process, the needle and the myriad threads stitch the personal narratives of the community, thus creating beautiful but invisible stories within the very essence of the work. The seductive and layered surfaces may suggest a deeper exploration of issues of submission, oppression, and domesticity. I explore the additive and subtractive qualities of actually creating apertures on the picture plane and then sewing them back in or leaving openings to create illuminated conceptual spaces with a mixed media approach. I connect the invisibility of the absence or presence of the feminine to the embroidery, linking, building, and making it part of the surface, quiet but graceful. My large-scale sculptural installations create universally welcoming environments through interplay of light, shadow, while the embroidered works on paper create intimacy and the presence of the feminine. Conceptually, using my own experiences as a woman of color, my artwork reaches beyond the personal to explore cultural binaries such as light and dark, masculine, feminine, private and public, definite and amorphous, life and death, and religious and secular. Growing up in an amnesia-induced Muslim country led to many early experiences of exclusion due to my gender. Subsequently, being an immigrant in an alien culture has its own challenges. Despite power inequities, home is a familiar place, and the feelings of inclusivity and intimacy is what I have sought to recreate in my artwork. My sculptural practice was initially inspired by a visit to the Alhambra in Granada, Spain. There, I experienced a space that had inherent contradictions, that is, similarities and differences like in both Pakistan and the US. Yet I had freedom to experience the place without bias. The complex was both alien, built by the Moors, but also uncannily familiar. It became my goal to recreate that wondrous experience through my art. I used pattern and color to construct architectural environments that create contradictions such as male and female, light and dark, heavy and light, fragile and strong, to show that our lives are abound with contradictions. Vivid color combinations in abundance has often been attributed to cultures that were considered exotic and thus less valid than the more sophisticated European cultures where muted and neutral colors seem to rule. I use bright colored walls for the spaces I illuminate with my sculptures, once again elevating that which has been considered unimportant. The resulting sculptures are steel cut with delicate lace-like patterns that reflect and refract light, integrating light and shadows with solid forms. My installations aspire simultaneously to be perceptually soothing and conceptually challenging. The shadows cast in all directions by the light spilling through the sculpture's cutout surfaces work magically, creating a dynamic transformation of the space in tandem with the itinerant movement of the audience, and allow viewers to bask in universal splendor that belongs to all who experience them. In such a space, it becomes possible to explore the powerful dialogue of shared experience that transcends the barriers that exist due to gender, color, race, religion, and culture. Rethinking our relationship to the planet, empowerment of the world's populations, including the feminine, and revamping the educational material is essential to the well-being of the world population. And I strongly believe if we educate a single mother, the whole family will be literate. Maybe such a strategy will make politicians work harder on our behalf. I wonder if that's the reason education is often poorly funded worldwide. Instead of banning books, maybe guns need regulation in civil society, so our children may be safer going to school. I wonder if that only makes sense to mothers. Over the years, I have lived on the boundaries of different faiths, such as Islam and Christianity, and in cultures like Pakistan and the US, which has deeply influenced my art, giving it a simultaneous sense of alienation and transience that informs the migrant's experience. The use of a variety of media to create large-scale sculptural installations to question my place within these binaries allows me to inquire into the validity of our broad cultural acceptance of them. At the conception and production of the first cube, I often discussed with Steve, my engineer and now husband, how scared I was that I was building a cube reminiscent of the Kaaba and what the ramifications could be if some fanatic took offense at my using it as an inspiration. In making the cube, I was essentially critiquing organized religion. My intent at the time was to rectify the injustices perpetrated on women and minorities in cultures across the world due to religious dogma, often I think based on incorrect interpretations of religious doctrine, which often reduces women to mere chattels used for procreation and domestic servitude by the very men who are supposed to protect them and empower them. This piece was a way to redress the balance in occupying the oft considered male position of an architect and using a structured geometric object built with materials, again, often attributed to men. I had dealt with many slights as a woman while growing up in Pakistan. I had observed female relatives suffering domestic abuse with limited protection from male relatives and became quietly convinced to never place myself in a similar position. The perforated cube in lacy jolly or mashrabia with a light was my way of using a female perspective and creating space that was in direct contrast to a masculine space. The inclusive spaces I create is by extension an invitation to all people, irrespective of race, color, gender, or creed. Discrimination in both East and West may originate due to different reasons, but accomplish the same results, like keeping half of the world's population dependent and behind economically, although recent years have shown us there is change in the air. In addition to questioning the assumptions behind the geometric or non-figurative form as certain and static, my work also provokes an investigation into questions of authenticity, which are central to the post-colonial condition. The intertwining of light and shadow, original and derivative, are all at the core of the various renditions of the pattern. They mirror the post-colonial quest for originality and purity, and ultimately circular geometric pursuit where primary form can only be imagined and never really captured. In our current environment where difference and divergence dominate most conversations about the intersection of civilization, my artwork explores the presence of harmonies that do not ignore the shadows, ambiguities, and dark spaces between them, but rather explore them in novel and unexpected ways. Clearly, my installation projects use light and pattern along with the palpability of reflection to question the assumptions of geometric design as a form of the pure and transcendental and thus opposite to representational art. The audience's presence becomes essential in experiencing a shared space while simultaneously affording, a shared space while simultaneously affording intimacy suggestive of the fluidity of human interactions. Often the large projects start with some political news such as the plight of refugees, immigrants, but also envelops my own experiences of exclusion as a woman of color here in the US and simply a woman in Pakistan. I have over the last many years experimented with painting the environments in dark colors and using multiple light sources to create overlapping shadows to demonstrate the requirement for multiplicity and intersectionality. As an immigrant myself who worked hard to help myself and many others in my community of artists, I hope the American dream comes true for many others who flock to the shores of the US. The dismissive rhetoric towards immigrants and refugees, people in need, hurts my heart, mind, and soul. Millions of people came to the US during and after the Second World War, yet we find people of different colors from the global South to be more problematic, possibly reflective of Islamophobia and color race issues. Fascism seems to be on the rise across the world and has affected the politics of even India, which ironically is composed largely of brown people. I think for art to become socially relevant for the general public, to draw learnings and conclusions, there needs to be a connection that draws them in. Making work that reflects our current issues is important to me, like this piece, for instance. I, like multiple other people, wanted to comment on the refugee problems both in Europe and the US over the last, half a decade, maybe more. While living outside of the US, people often talked about the US as a beacon of light for people to flock to. There in America, one can find freedom. However, the vision of America internationally may have tarnished over the past few decades. During the concept development and making of this project, I felt that the vision of America became a mirage where on arrival, the USA is unable to provide respite to the hungry and the needy, as it was written on the Statue of Liberty. These two pieces were inspired by the beautiful book rests my mother used to read her Quran on. However, in this particular piece, I decided to remove the doorway as I wanted to comment on the lack of agency many people face when confronted by poverty, violence, and destitution, thus representing people within the US who may also be struggling. Shadows fascinate me. They are conceptual drawings in space. A three-dimensional object flattens and overlaps due to light and where it's emanating from. Conceptually, it speaks volumes on how the world is porous yet siloed too. There are boundaries one is not allowed to cross, keeping large populations in place, which to me is a very colonized view of perceiving the world. Many artists have influenced me over the years: Robert Irwin, Shirin Nishat, Anne Hamilton, Mona Hatoum, Cornelia Parker, Theaster Gates, Raphael, Lozano Hemmer, Maya Lin. The list is very long. In some cases, the influence is not apparent in my work, but deals with the expansive nature of their works and how it allows me to expand my own work. And in other cases, like in this piece, you see Robert Irwin's influence visibly. I love artists and people who work with artists, as imagination to do bigger and better is often very inspiring for me. And technology has become an integral part of my practice, and working with fabricators allows me to work large to create work that is often immersive and transformational. These two paintings were completed last year for my show in New York City at the Sundaram Tagore Gallery in Chelsea. I used pietra dura, a 16th century process invented in Italy and brought to India through commerce. The Taj Mahal was built in marble with an abundance of pietra dura techniques and is one of the great gems of the Mughal Empire that ruled India for numerous centuries. I used technology where artisans in the past carved by hand the patterns that adorn the Taj Mahal. For these paintings, a CNC machine was used to carve into the substrate and then filled with colored resin, emulating the technique used on marble. It is indeed a very complicated and time-consuming process. Charred gold, this particular project was conceived during the pandemic when my older sister died in 2020, and for me, her loss went deep. As mentioned before, I was reading books like the 1619 Project, Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth, Ain't I a Woman, all really hard books. Many of these books deal with inequality in some fashion, discussing the politics result in control of bodies and minds, control of resources and borders, thus containment. I thought of making a cube as a void. In this project, I chose a solid cube and added surface embellishment through languages and pattern. The small cubes that will create that created the large geometric shape in space are solid and create no immersive light shadow to paint the walls, although there are reflective shadows. Some considerations for this project specifically were the weight we all carry, the weight of chaos, the messiness of human lives, as well as the desire for order and control, along with the resources we consume in large quantities, labor and the value associated to the bodies that perform it. Human history from ancient, historic, and contemporary time periods show human goodness, ingenuity, vision, engineering, and accomplishments, but it also shows humans have perpetrated terrible inequities on people and the natural environment. For this project, there are 125 cubes sized at 6 by 6. The piece itself weighed only 0.5 pounds each. Each cube is black, charred with Urdu and English script and crowned with an appropriated pattern, showing the elegance and opulence that is tied to capitalism. I wanted to describe the types of authoritarian repression perpetrated and faced in societies across the world in spite of all the progress made in science and education. Using Urdu translations for the words in the cubes allows me to be represented. The installation has 26 words repeated to show the visual weight and size of the types of repression used to keep people fighting over scraps. It, in my mind, was like a mashrabia where you could see the spaces in between. The black and chalk blocks are to represent the slave trade into the Americas alongside of the undervalued work and gendered bodies performed for world societies. Black and charred blocks further reference black gold, oil, coal, and gas, resources humans keep fighting wars over. And the charring refers to skin, texture, and color. It references the areas of the world where black and brown people live and work and are now being affected by climate change and the past colonizations. It also references the refugees escaping climate disasters, wars, and economic issues. This piece, All the Flowers Are For Me, opened at the Royal Botanical Gardens at Kew in London. I also showed 2 brand new pieces titled Stolen Moments, inspired by the large project titled Stealing Beauty I showed in the beginning of this presentation. A beautiful despair orange was specifically fabricated to participate in the exhibition titled Reorientations that opened in late March at Kunsthaus, Zurich, an encyclopedic museum. The curator, Sandra Gianfrida's intentions were to reorient the Western gaze towards the East to understand the impact of both East and West on each other. I chose the orange to reflect the exoticization of the Western gaze when looking to the East. It's interesting to compare the orange cube to the blue one in the next slide, which I'm sure the audience members are familiar with, the 2 large projects that are shown in flight patterns at the Cummer Museum. I love the 2 lush greens I selected for Cummer Museum as I wanted the colors of the spaces to reflect the greenery of Florida. I have been snorkeling to the Florida Keys at least 4 or 5 times now, and I love the greens one sees while on the water or the land. Makes me want to conserve the beauty of the region. I'm happy to answer questions after this slide. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Anila. I know we had one question early on from Danae. Danae asks, what is your inspiration? And you might have addressed that already, but is there anything you'd like to elaborate on?
I think life itself is my inspiration. I think living in the real world kind of helps me solve a lot of the issues that I have in my studio or vice versa. I think I'm never lonely in the studio. I feel like I have much that I can deal with there. I'm often, lonely outside of the studio because, with the pandemic, our communities kind of got separated quite a bit, and I'm living apart from my family right now, which makes it very difficult. But I think really the contradictions that I see in life really sort of help me make the work I make.
Thank you. Let's see, we have someone is asking, what happens to your large immersive artworks after a show?
They get decompressed into their various parts, and they're put in crates, and then they go to a storage space in Indiana. I have a fairly large inventory, thanks to Steve, who is my engineer as well as the fabricator in chief. So we somehow manage all the workload. I mean, like this year, I think I've got like maybe 12 shows that I have either opening or participating in group show, or so it's a pretty large enterprise that we are sort of managing as a mom and pop store. It's hard but rewarding.
Yeah, very rewarding. Very rewarding. And we're so honored to be able to enjoy your exhibition at the museum and to be able to meet you and meet Steve. It's fun to see how you all work together and how you're playing various roles, but it all comes together to present a seamless exhibition of artworks. It's truly, truly amazing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I hope the audience members are enjoying the shows.
They definitely are.
The show, sorry, not the shows. I can't hear myself talk.
We understand. Thank you. Thank you for being with us. I know you're a little under the weather and we really appreciate you taking the time and sharing with our visitors. We have a visitor named Rachel who asked, have you ever thought about going into politics?
Me?
You, yes, you.
I think one should, I participate as a citizen and I vote and I, do what I can, which sometimes is not enough, I think, but I think I am better at doing what I do. And, I wish I had the desire to be a politician. I don't. I feel sometimes that maybe one loses perspective when one becomes a politician, possibly.
Sure.
Because you're kind of trying to push your own agenda instead of really solving problems for the entire community, people that you're representing. I think our politics right now are so divisive. It feels very much like each person is only talking their own rhetoric, but not trying to understand what really needs to be solved. And maybe, we should insist that education should be more important for all citizens.
And it's exciting that art as kind of a universal communicator can really be a way to convey messages and inspire people and present tough topics through the lens of beauty and positivity.
Yeah,
we definitely need that in the world.
Well, I feel like I am, contributing in a different way as well, because I am also working as an educator. So that allows me to see a different perspective. And I feel like, if one works with students who are poor or underrepresented, you realize how difficult it is to rise, and do well for yourself. And, education should even the field out a little, but unfortunately, that's not the way of the world. I think class systems that we have in place kind of make it difficult for people to move. I mean, I am an exception to the rule. And so I do appreciate that I have a position of, a platform that I can speak from. I feel like, art does act like educationally and impact people's thinking and the way they approach people and the world and solving problems. So I think I feel like this is my niche area and I do it well, so I should continue to do it.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's great. Well said. Well said. Danae has a question about books. So in this talk, you mentioned 1619 Project by Nicole Hannah-Jones, The Wretched of the Earth by Franz Fanon, Ain't I a Woman by Sojourner Truth, and then you also mentioned a talk by Julia Bryan Wilson, which was entitled Embellished Legacies. So Danae is asking, what is your favorite book?
I found the 1619 Project very informational and educational, because often books are, that I have read in the past, these are mostly books written by people of color. And so I'm really trying to change my perspective of trying to understand, not from a dominant cultural writer or authors, but also trying to understand positioning from a different point of view. And I think the 1619 project was, I found, the most educational. But I'm also, going back and rereading Ben Ghiat's book, Strong Men, because our world is really seeing the pendulum swing between strong men and liberal democracies. And I feel like if we want to save our way of life, we need to participate, be part of the voting, and make changes to the laws that impact people across the board. It should be equity based. And so I think that book has been very intensely appreciated by me. I also loved the book Ain't I a Woman, because that's a voice that was, quite a while back. And it feels like it's still so relevant. And so I haven't bought the book, the Legacies book yet. I hope to buy it soon. I've been traveling so much recently. But I also like to read books that are on Audible, so I can read and work at the same time. That has made both my loves come together, to be able to do both simultaneously. And sometimes you do tend to drift off, so you have to repeat the chapter or something, but it becomes more and more like it falls on you like rain. And I really like that feeling of the words coming down on me. Like, Dr. Martin Luther King said something similar about like words coming down. So I find that if I can read while I'm working, that I'm not just collecting books.
True.
Like books so art books are also my passion. I mean, everywhere I go, I buy books, and, it's just becoming quite difficult to move them around the country as I keep moving. But, so I don't know if I just waffled or.
Oh, no, that's great. That's great. I think your description of the audiobook while you're working is, that gentle falling, that gentle rain. I can picture you almost getting into that meditative kind of flow zone where you're just in the zone, but you're also able to listen. Yeah, that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah,
to be able to multitask just a little bit.
Yeah. And, sometimes you'll drift off and you'll start thinking, or I'll drift off and I'll start thinking of something else, and then I'll come back because the person who's reading the book has said something really dramatic, and suddenly my attention is back to it. Then I have to go and rewind it and listen to it over again so I can understand how we got to that point. But yeah, I also enjoy long journeys, because then I can actually listen to a full book like that. And so recently I read a beautiful novel that the title escapes me, but it was written by, if I can quickly look at it, it was titled, The Secrets Between Us. It was
Sounds
such
familiar.
a beautiful book, The Secrets Between Us.
Great.
I was like, wow. It's about this old lady growing older in India. And I find novels that kind of give us that experience of the human condition as being so memorable.
Wonderful. We had a couple more comments, but no other questions. Someone was saying that the needlework on the works that you displayed are so intricate and expressive. So it sounds like they appreciate that. And Doreen is saying they've really enjoyed this talk and the exhibition, and they hope you feel better soon. Which we all do. Thank you.
I was hoping that, I'd be fine by now. But like since Monday, I've been like trying to gargle, drinking lots of chamomile tea, and
Good.
Claritin, this, that, and the other, trying all sorts of remedies.
Well, you take good care of you. We really
Thank you so
appreciate you taking the time and sharing your stories and images with us. For the audience, I've popped a quick survey in the chat. We'll also send that out to you all via email. And then, as we mentioned, the recording of this presentation will be available shortly on our YouTube channel. So with that, we're going to bid everyone a good evening, and we hope to see everyone at the museum soon. Anila, we're very sad that your exhibition is closing at the end of this month, but I'm so glad.
I had a wonderful experience with Cummer Museum. And
Us
the
too.
diverse, lovely audience that I got to meet. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful experience. Thank you. All right, you take care. Feel better.